You are listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZW LP Conroe and 106.1 KZCC LP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Welcome to the Weekly Business Hour. This edition, I'm Rick Schissler, your host. I'm also a Silver Fox advisor and the founder of OneBestConsult.com, a community where small businesses can come together on the web and support and encourage each other. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think we've lined up a good list of guests for the show today. We're going to start off with an interview with a local entrepreneur here in Montgomery County. We've got Lisa Smith. Lisa has started a business, Dragon Investigations. I think you'll enjoy not only her personal story, but some of the things that she does as an investigator. She has a license as a private investigator, but what she really focuses on is finding fraud in all sizes of businesses, background checks, things like that can help our business survive and thrive on a day-to-day basis. And I also have Linda Ballesteros back with us. Linda is Mpower Franchise Consulting. She's been a guest on this show before. She's going to update us on what's happening in the franchising world and about an event that's coming up soon that if you're interested in being involved or purchasing a franchise, you can attend and get lots and lots of information in one place. So before we go any further, I want to remind everybody, email. If you've got a question that regarding your own business or something you hear on the show, or you want to make a comment about the show, a way we can improve it, anything like that, drop me an email. I really, really appreciate those emails. Just send them right here to Lone Star Community Radio. It's simple, rick@irlonestar.com. That's rick@irlonestar.com. Please send your questions. We do respond, and I deeply enjoy responding to them personally. So without further ado, let's check in on our conversation that we had with Lisa Smith, Dragon Investigations. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have got another stop in our visit and trip around the great city of Conroe, Texas, Montgomery County, looking for people that are in business, small business, entrepreneurs, startups, folks that have been at it for a while. And today we're blessed to stop by and visit with Lisa. Lisa, how are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you, Rick.
Well, we've got a beautiful day, the start of fall. Lisa Smith, by explanation to our listeners, is a private investigator licensed by the state of Texas. And if you check into that law by chance, you'll find that it covers a lot of different professions, broad category of private investigators. So Lisa works primarily with forensic investigations. And that is can be a very, very helpful thing for most businesses. So Lisa, why don't you give us some background of what brought you to open your company, Dragon Investigation Group?
Okay. Well, I've had a couple of careers before I got into private investigation. My last career was going away, being outsourced, going overseas, going digital. So I decided to go back to school to pursue a long-held interest in criminal justice. I did not know how I was going to translate that degree into any kind of career. I was too old to be to work for the government. Didn't want to be a police officer, but a local private investigator group came and gave a talk at the college. And I thought, yeah, I think I can do that. So I mentored with them for about a year and then opened up my own business and have been building and growing and learning ever since.
Well, you know, your background, like many of us, we open a business, our first business at some point, and all that experience comes to way. You have got, I just have to say, a tremendous background as a computer programmer. You've worked in the medical field, as you mentioned, your schooling, criminal justice. That makes you, to me, profile out as potentially a great investigator. Well, let's talk about specifically what you do. I mean, you're a forensic investigator. Tell us what that's all about.
Well, it's not really, forensic isn't really the right word.
Okay.
I'm a certified fraud examiner.
Okay.
So in the course of my growing and learning as a private investigator, I discovered that I didn't really enjoy the typical private investigator duties, the surveillance and the interviews, jailhouse interviews and things like that. So I got extra training as a certified fraud examiner through the ACFE, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, which are based out of Austin, Texas. And what that entails is allows me to focus more on white collar crime and fraud in the small businesses and things like that. And I bring all of the private investigator skills to bear on doing fraud examinations. So.
Well, that obviously is, unfortunately, it seems to be a booming field, meaning the you call it politely white collar crime. You've also got a background. I didn't want to skip over it because you and I have talked about this prior to the interview. You've got a background in genealogy, which to me brings even another skill set to what you do. Talk about that a little bit.
So genealogy has been a hobby of mine ever since my teens. And once I came into the PI world and realized that, all of the skills and the things that I was doing for genealogy work really applied. They were the same as the private investigator. They were, you're putting pieces of a puzzle together. You have to document each step. You have to write an end result or end report, a resultant report and things like that. So I just started to incorporate that into my business as another service area. I'm also the president of a local genealogical society down in Clear Lake, the Bay Area Genealogical Society. I'll make a plug for their name. And we spend our efforts on educating people on how to do genealogy research and the skills and the techniques and things like that. I've had several successful cases where I matched DNA adoptees and their birth relatives through DNA matching. So it's all relative. It's all the same investigations, putting pieces of the puzzle together and that sort of thing. So I really enjoy doing that kind of work.
Yeah, it's amazing because, like you say, genealogy is somewhat similar in a broad sense, at least, of the kind of fraud investigation work you do and checking and trying to uncover that type of work. Now, when you do a fraud investigation, do you work with other professions like accounting and those kind of people in your cases?
Yes, I can. It depends on the situation, depends on the business and things like that. We usually start with a fraud risk assessment, which is sitting down with the key players in a company and going over their business processes and looking for the controls that they have in place to prevent fraud, kind of giving them an idea of where there are gaps in those controls, how to fix those gaps, and move forward to protecting their business. And then if we were to find something along the way, and we would go into an investigation, I kind of flip over into my PI mode and, document things along that way. And if I need help with certain things, I will talk to, say, the accounting department, or I'll talk to, I have resources, colleagues that I work with where an attorney who might advise me to do something this way rather than that way so that the company and my client is protected. So, yeah.
When it comes to smaller businesses, owner operated businesses, maybe have 5, 10, 20 employees. What can you do for those size businesses as far as the services you provide?
Well, that is where my passion lies, is in helping small businesses. So small businesses, as you mentioned before, fraud is just rampant, and it's around the globe. And small businesses, those with 1,000 or less employees, actually account for half of all occupational fraud globally. Those businesses with 100 employees or less account for a quarter of all occupational fraud, again, globally. So small businesses are really being hit hard by fraud. Unfortunately, a lot of the small business owners they're entrepreneurs. They're busy building their business and focused on growing their business and things like that. And fraud is not even on their radar often. And they have the thought that they know all their employees, they trust their employees, things like that. But the statistics bear out that small businesses are hit hardest, with fraud. So I can do a fraud risk assessment, as I mentioned before. I can come in and hand out a questionnaire to the key players in the company, have them answer those, and then we all sit down in a room, half a day, whole day, whatever it takes, depending on their size of their company and their needs. And we just hash out, what have you got in place right now? Here are the gaps. Here's some suggestions on how to close up those gaps. And then we can go further if the small business owner says, well, I don't know how to write a fraud policy, or I don't know how to put that particular control in place. I can help them with that as well, and give them suggestions, give them some templates, and then just keep following up with them to make sure that the controls that they have put in place continue to work. Monitoring is a big deal. Once you've got your fraud policy and your controls in place, you want to make sure that you continually monitor to make sure that it's working. So I can help small business owners put all that in place. And
let me ask you, what is the typical situation? And I say maybe there's not a typical, but generally speaking, that a small business finds itself in that would cause you to be brought in to either do preventative services like you mentioned, or to do an investigation. What does a typical scenario look like when someone reaches out to you?
Well, I'm not sure if I can give a typical one, because as you said, nothing is typical. Their businesses are all different, depends on the industry they're in and their structure and things like that. I guess one example I can give is, actually, I worked with a nonprofit where they were meeting in person. This is before COVID, of course. And they had a registrar, a membership coordinator who would be taking in applications at a desk at meetings, and would take the cash and the checks that new members would sign up and whatnot. And rather than taking that money and handing it over to the treasurer of the organization at the end of that meeting, that night or that day, this person would actually take that chunk of money home. And it would be converted into a personal check. This person would write a personal check and hand it to the treasurer a week, 2 weeks, a month later. the treasurer would then, of course, deposit that check and say membership dues received and whatnot. There was a record of the monies written down by the registrar, as he received the money. But again, this person wrote that information down. There was nobody else around really watching what he wrote down. He took the money home, and who knows where and when, if any money disappeared, if things like that. So this was on an extremely small scale, but this is the sort of thing that can happen where someone just accepts money. There's no oversight. There's nobody to verify that this was the money that was received, and then the taking of the money home and not just immediately passing it on to the treasurer for deposit opens up all kinds of possibilities of theft and things like that. So that's just a small scale sample. And basically I came in and just put in some, placed in some policies, suggested some policies in place where the money gets immediately turned over at the end of the meeting. The logged information is counted right there between the registrar and the treasurer. They at the end of the meeting, they make the time, they get together, the treasurer counts everything that came in, makes sure that it all matches on the log sheet, and then he takes the money home and or to the bank the next day. So that's just a very simple example, but that's one example of how I can help put in a policy or put in a process in place to help prevent any kind of skimming.
Well, that's a wonderful example. Based on my experience in working in retail service business, cash back in the day was well, and checks too, but that is a great example. Hopefully our listeners, if they don't have these processes in place, whether it's cash or credit or whatever, there are schemes and ways to take your money, business owners. So,
oh yes.
Well, we're going to take a short break now in our conversation with Lisa, and I hope you'll stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Many Hurricane Harvey survivors still face losses and emotional stress. A new hurricane season can add new stresses. Texans Recovering Together can help with local outreach for emotional support, education, resource referrals, and disaster preparation. It's free, confidential, and any Harvey survivor is eligible. Call Texans Recovering Together at 936-521-6143 or dial 211 for the provider near you.
Hey, this is Wayne Green, your host for Radio Wayne, Spoke and More. Each Saturday from 5 to 7 p.m., I'll be playing folk, singer-songwriter, Americana, blues, bluegrass, classic country, Cajun Zydeco, Celtic swing, and whatever else seems to fit. Once again, that's Radio Wayne, Spoke and More, every Saturday from 5 to 7 p.m. on Lone Star Community Radio.
Have a legal question? Are you a resident of Montgomery County? Call 281-645-6344 to talk to a volunteer attorney from the Woodlands Bar Association. We answer the phones on the first Monday of every month at 281-645-6344 from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. to provide general legal information and information about legal resources to Montgomery County residents.
Well, Lisa, thank you for staying with us. I want to continue this conversation because we spent a lot of time talking about fraud investigations within the small business, primarily in the area of funds, money, cash, record keeping. But you do a lot of other things. I mean, as far as your ability as an investigator, talk to us about some of those other areas that your services touch on.
The private investigation type of services that I also can do are things like background checks, basic background checks, And there's different levels of those background checks depending on your needs. I can do background checks for employees, you know, if you're hiring someone and you want to vet them. If you're a small business and you're trying to onboard a vendor, which is also another fraud control, is to actually have an onboarding process for your vendors, not just your employees, but your vendors as well. And that would include background checks on vendors. And there's different levels of background checks. I can certainly do more advanced background checks rather than just the criminal and civil records and things like that. I also am educated in doing equivocal death investigations, wrongful death investigations, and that basically entails questioning or investigating the coroner's says that it's a suicide versus a homicide.
Lisa,
Yes.
you froze up for about a minute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's not your fault. I don't know whether it was your internet or my internet. Let's kind of go back, and we've only about 2 minutes in, and just start over this segment.
Okay.
And that way we'll have it, I mean, because it was quite a pause.
Oh, okay.
And again, I don't know whose fault it might have been. It was the internet for sure. So,
Right. So you want me to start with the background checks?
well, yeah, but I'm going to start this where I took the break,
Okay.
and then we'll come back and we'll kind of go through it. We didn't have to be exact what we did before, but we'll get.
Okay.
Well, welcome back. We're visiting with Lisa Smith. She is the owner of Dragon Investigations Group. Lisa provides a variety of services. We're going to talk about some of the other things that a private investigator doing investigations, background checking and whatnot can provide. And Lisa, we went to the break. We talked a lot about fraud investigations in our first segment. Let's talk about some of the other services you offer that relate particularly to our small businesses.
Sure. So I do the typical background checks that you hear about for employees and vendors. That's one fraud control that I recommend small businesses have, which is an onboarding process for their vendors in addition to their employees. But vetting your vendors is a great way to control fraud as well. So basic background checks, I get some advanced background checks, things along those lines. I also perform or am educated in doing equivocal death investigations. And that's where there's a question on the cause or manner of death. And a family disagrees with what the coroner has determined as their manner or cause of death. And we can do some investigation into that to try to prove or disprove that result. I do some, I'm very good at locating assets and or witnesses. So for, say, a class action lawsuit, if an attorney is looking for witnesses, I have a process I use that I can try to get them a whole bunch of ex-employees, say, at the company that they're suing, and they might be able to find their silver bullet witness through that. And then finally, I do genealogical research, DNA matching, match up adoptees with birth relatives, create family trees, and research individuals and things like that.
Well, you offer a variety of subjects or services, excuse me. Let's go back to the background checking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the biggest things that I learned through, unfortunately, experience in this case was that if I didn't hire someone right in the beginning, then the outcome was almost 100% of the time was going to be bad. And part of that was checking backgrounds. And do you find that that is when you get called in and there's been, say, some kind of theft or whatever, it's the background check that was missed or not done? Was there something in the background perhaps that would have, red flag would have popped up?
Yes, that can definitely be the case. Even in large corporations, sometimes a background check gets done and there are red flags in the background check, but the company chooses to ignore them. And the end result is most often not good. So I can, one example I have is I actually worked for a company a long time ago in the HR department, believe it or not, and they did their background checks, but their background checks were just a simple throw in a name. They had a company that would do the background checks. There was a traveling nurse that they did a background check on. And the background check itself didn't say anything of a criminal nature, but what it did show is that this traveling nurse had a history where all the other hospitals across the country, they were let go. And there were reasons why this traveling nurse was let go, but nobody looked at that. And it turned out the traveling nurse was stealing narcotics, and that's why they would get caught and they would be let go. But because they were a traveling nurse, they just moved on to the next thing. So that's an example where even a background check gets done, but if it's done by a company who's just, what do I want to say, like a production line, they're just feeding in the names, pulling out some information and sending it along. They're not doing any analysis of that background check. So I do a little bit more, and I do that analysis for you. And I also, there's a level of background check that I can do where I look into the person's social media and news and stories about them, and try to find if there's anything untoward in their background.
Well, I can be a testimonial that what you do, I appreciate the extent you do it as well, as you mentioned, but based on, again, on my number of years in business of hiring people, retail service and other businesses, and it wasn't necessarily that they turned out to be a thief. There were just other things that if we had done a better background check would have shown up. And things that show up in background checks, red flag goes up, and I don't hire them. So I would encourage anyone that's in business of hiring anyone other than maybe immediate family that you need to do this. Well, I've been tricked by a referral or two too. I mean, I relied on it too heavy, and referrals are the best source, in my opinion, of new people. Well, let's talk about asset location. That's something you do. Where assets, I guess that typically involves some kind of dispute. How do you just quickly kind of walk us through how you locate an asset?
Okay, so I would say, for example, we have a case where people are getting divorced and they have to split their assets, or whatever, and one party is hiding an asset. Sometimes they hide a boat or something along those lines. So the first thing I would do is I would start with a background check to determine if they have assets, property, cars, watercraft, things like that. There are ways to find out if they have those items. And then you just do a basic tracking of where was the asset last located. And sometimes you go and surveil places and things and interview people to find out if there are if the asset was here, if it wasn't, that sort of thing. I had an example, a case where a gentleman was hiding his sailboat, and there's a tool where you can actually track boats and their locations because they are registered with the state. And I found the marina where this boat was last seen, looked through the whole marina. The boat was not there, but I did speak to a new employee of the marina who didn't know enough not to talk to me. And she actually said, yeah, that boat was here like this morning. And I think they, came and took it. So the PI stuff starts to kick in, and you just try to track things down and hope that you find it. So.
Well, I'm sure one day you'll write a book about all these. They may seem mundane, but heck,
yes,
they make movies out of less. So one of the things I noticed, you've got a talk coming up that you've set up with the Conroe, Lake Conroe Chamber of Commerce. Tell us a little bit about that in the time we have remaining.
Yes, so I haven't scheduled it as yet, but it'll be, it's geared towards small business owners in the community, and it's just it's about educating them on fraud and why they need fraud risk assessments for their business. Give them some statistics, as we talked about at the beginning here, of how bad fraud is in small businesses, and give them some tools on how to protect their businesses, resources, and just let them know that I'm here to help them try to protect their business from fraud, losing their hard-earned assets. So.
Well, that's a conversation I would encourage every business person within a radius of 50 miles or whatever is convenient, or a member of the chamber, obviously. And I encourage you, please let us know here at the Weekly Business Hour when you have it, and we'll put it up on our social media. So to broaden the advertising and marketing of that program. Well, Lisa, I can't thank you enough for taking time to visit with us. You work in a very interesting, intriguing world where, as we well know, books, movies, all kinds of situations have been explored. And but one that I think is very critical to the operation of any business, small business, on a day-to-day basis, is to utilize services that you offer, particularly when you go to hire and otherwise a red flag comes up that something's amiss in your financial processes. So if people want to get in touch with you with a question, or perhaps to engage your services, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the number of different ways. They can go to my website, www.dragoninvestigation.com. They can give me a call. My phone number is 281-670-8334, or they can email me, info@dragoninvestigation.com. And just give me a call, email me, whatever. We'll talk about what your need is, and we can go from there.
Well, again, thank you so much for being our guest, and again, sharing your business and what you do. In my opinion, a real asset to our community, to our business community.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation that we had with Lisa. Like I had promised in the beginning of today's show, very interesting field. Fraud does not reserve itself for larger businesses. Smaller businesses can suffer from fraud. Very important to take certain preventative steps as well. In the second half of the show now, as promised earlier on, we're going to have Linda Ballesteros. Linda is with Mpower Franchise Consulting, and Linda's going to update us on where franchising is, what's out there, what's happening, and also tell us about a very special event coming up. So I encourage you, please stay with us, and when we come back from the break, we'll hear from Linda Ballesteros.
God's Garage is a 501c3 that repairs and gives away cars for free to single moms, widows, and wives of deployed military. You can help God's Garage by donating a vehicle, volunteering your time, or by monetary donation. God's Garage is located at 2106 East Davis, Conroe. If you'd like to learn more about God's Garage, visit our website at godsgarage.org. Or you can contact us and we would be glad to come and make a presentation to your group.
Want to check out the fastest growing sport in the world? It's right here in Conroe, Texas, and it's roller derby. Conroe Roller Derby is a non-profit recreational league of women and men who want you to come and check out the fast-paced, hard-hitting game of roller derby. The Conroe Cutthroats practice at Rainbow Roller Rink on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. You can find our game schedule and more information on our website, www.conroerollerderby.com.
We have the safest food supply in the world. Strict laws and regulations restrict the usage of hormones, antibiotics, and pesticides within our food supply. Production agriculture practices and technologies such as the use of GMOs, which is not any more or less risky than conventional crop production, has allowed American farmers to produce more food on less acres in environmentally sound ways. Find out more online at pathtotheplate.tamu.edu. We are Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, helping Texans make lives better.
Well, welcome back. We're in the second half of the weekly business hour. We appreciate you listening to us today. And by the way, if you happen to have missed something or you want to share the show later this week, in a couple, 3 days, a copy of the show will be posted. You can see the video or listen to the podcast. It's posted on the radio station's website, Lone Star Community Radio, as well as on other websites such as onebestconsult.com, Facebook, our page, The Weekly Business Hour. So please share and enjoy the show. Look back over what we talk about. Now we're going to switch over, as promised, to Linda Ballesteros. Linda is one of the experts in the franchising field. Her primary goal is to help people find the franchise that's right for them. So let's listen and hear about a conversation we had with Linda, an update on what's happening in the franchise world for those who might be thinking about applying or obtaining a franchise. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back on the street, as they say. We've been fortunate enough to bump into or find Linda Ballesteros, and who is the expert, our neighbor expert, if you will, in the area for franchising. Linda, welcome once again to the Weekly Business Hour.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Rick. It's a pleasure to be back.
Well, you absolutely have years and years of experience, and you're right on top of franchising. So it's been a while since you've been in and talked a little more in detail. And I thought today we just take a few minutes, kind of update us as to what's going on. There's a new trend that's developed, the great, I think you call it the Great Resignation. So let's talk about that. What's that all about?
Sure. And Rick, you know it's a real thing when it has its own hashtag, right? So you can go out and you can find anything and everything you want to know about the Great Resignation. And it's interesting because this is a movement that has come out of the pandemic, and all of these employees who were corporate employees deciding, I'm not so sure I want to go back and do that again. I've been working from home. I haven't had the commute, haven't had to worry about getting dressed or anything else. So I kind of like this work from home thing. So that's where a lot of it began.
Well, yes, and absolutely all of us, me included, had a lot of time to think about different issues and about our life and reflect. And so I'm sure that was an encouragement for folks to back up and reconsider what their plans were, where they want to be career-wise. The Great Resignation, I mean, why are people deciding quitting these jobs? We hear they're corporate jobs, so meaning, I guess, large companies, but what's driving all that?
So what is driving a lot of it is, I believe that, and I call the pandemic the Great Pause. So it created a pause in our life. It was a forced pause, but for some of us, that's what it takes, is that forced pause to kind of look around and say, is this really all there is? So families had started cooking dinner together. They had started having their meals together again. Kids were playing in the backyard, tossing the ball with mom and dad. There was a lot of that family value that came back because of the pandemic. And I believe that people were able to reevaluate their why. So they were able to then say, gosh, this is really so much less stressful. And it's so much better for the family. And I think that's where it started, Rick, something just that simple.
Yeah, and like you said, that, you know, with time and the reflection, and like you say, everybody being forced together, so to speak, particularly families, and having that time to evaluate. What is the reason, though, behind career change? I mean, you have people come to you that want some guidance in franchising because they want to change. So we've got, again, this great resignation taking place. What are some of the other drivers besides the fact that we were locked up together for a year or two?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do believe too that during that period of time, it allowed us to do some research, if you will, some that maybe thinking a little more creatively. And out of that, realizing that maybe we've hit that glass ceiling. Maybe I can't go anywhere else in my career to increase my income. Maybe they liked the flexibility, being able to do things with the kids and still coming back home and doing some work at home after the kids go to bed. And, you know, they would just seem to be a little more happier. And I think some of that is there wasn't the commute. When I was in corporate, Rick, I had a 2-hour commute, hour there and an hour back. And by the weekend, I was exhausted. So a lot of those things played in, they were factors with people taking that time and realizing, you know, maybe I don't have to go back and do this.
Well, you mentioned that commute. I know in an area like here in Conroe, Montgomery County, not as much as an issue perhaps as the greater Houston area, going in and out of Houston. There was always a lot of talk about the commute, right? And the accidents and all. And I know as individually, I'm glad I'm out of that environment, even though I would not go, I'm not going to work every day at a certain time. So that stress relief has got to be very important. People recognizing how much stress just the commute alone.
Absolutely. And the time investment, you know, they're realizing now that maybe they don't have to work 50 hours a week. Maybe they don't have to work 80 hours a week to be successful. There are great franchise concepts out there where you can, there's a lot of money to be made. And many of these franchises actually thrive during this time, Rick. It's just amazing how many of them have just exploded. So just because it's a pandemic and just because the restaurants and the fitness centers didn't necessarily fare well during it, that doesn't mean that all industries suffered.
Well, let's talk about that now. Here we are at September 2021, coming up on a 2-year anniversary, if you will, of the pandemic and its beginning. People are resigning or deciding they don't want to go back to doing what they did for, we discussed several different reasons, and I'm sure there could be hundreds, but it is definitely happening because I've read about it everywhere and heard from corporate leaders that they are, or even small business owners having hard finding people. So, I mean, franchising, why would that definitely be a potential for these people who are saying, I don't want to go back to what I was doing, but now I want something new? Talk about franchising, why that may be a really great choice.
Sure. And the franchise business model is a great model for those, especially those coming out of corporate that are used to following a system anyway. And an independent business person, if you're just starting your business from scratch, you're going to need to check all the CRMs. You're going to have to test drive this one and test drive that one. And there are so many moving components. What do you do about marketing when all you know is your widget? So the great thing about franchising is you have all of that in a box, but it's so much more than that. it's been referred to as a business in the box, but you have this great leadership team. So Rick, during the pandemic, many of these franchisors, they stepped right in and they helped their franchisees to renegotiate their leases. They helped them by waiving the royalties. They helped them in keeping the doors open, staying on top of the ever-changing PPP regulations and all of that was out there. So to have that leadership team to help guide you through crisis like this, we may not have another pandemic, but we all know that there's going to be another crisis around the corner, and to have your own board of directors to help to guide you through that is just the best way to go. And I saw franchisees really do well when independent businesses were really struggling.
Well, you make a lot of good points in favor of the franchise model, which I always believed in my 30 plus years in the business world, small business, it is a really good option for a certain number of people. Great option in many cases, particularly for corporate folks who have gone through the resignation or otherwise. You've got a virtual workshop coming up that talks about a lot of these issues. Tell us about that.
Sure. There's going to be it's going to be a panel discussion, I guess you would say. There are going to be 4 speakers, and I'm one of those, and I'm speaking on franchising. There's going to be Tony Harris Taylor, and she's going to be talking about from a franchisee's perspective. And then we have David Schissler, and he is going to be talking from the master franchise owner. So you can own an area, which allows you to open multiple locations. And then we're going to have someone talking about social media and how you leverage the social media. And the name of that is The Great Resignation: To Franchise or Not to Franchise. And that's going to be coming up. We actually started, Rick, with it being in person, but we had so many people reach out to us that the room wasn't going to be large enough. So we decided to take it virtually. People are used to the virtual concept, so we thought we would just open it up virtually.
And when is that going to happen, and how may people get more information or make a reservation or whatever needs to be done?
Sure. That's going to be October the 9th. It's from 9 a.m. until noon. And you can email me, Linda, at the letter M, the word power, franchiseconsulting.com. So that's Linda at empowerfranchiseconsulting.com. And I'm happy to send you more information on it.
Well, I really appreciate that, because it sounds like this particular session, virtual session, will give those who are interested, who are even thinking about it, you invest a couple, 3 hours of your time, and you can probably get a pretty fair picture of what franchising is in general. Plus, make connections with people like yourself if they decide to take that first step that can help them and guide them to the right franchise.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate it, Rick. Absolutely.
Well, Linda, I can't thank you enough for taking time. I'm glad we got out and had this conversation. And I would encourage listeners, if you are thinking franchise, reach out to Linda. Okay, at that's the letter empowerconsulting.com. That's the website. Linda, we also will plan to post the link that you supplied us on this show graphically, so people have that access as well. Again, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. It's a beautiful sunny day, a little bit warm, but have fun out there.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Take care. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Linda. Franchising is an interesting thing. It's a great model for business. It fits certain people, particularly those coming out of a corporate environment, people that want some support, want some help, want the concept laid out for them and where they can go in and just make it happen. And I encourage you, if you're thinking about opening a business or going into business for yourself, take a look at the franchise model. It may be the right step for you personally. Well, as we wind down today's show, I want to remind you of several things. First of all, a recording of today's show will be available after Wednesday of this week. You can go to our page, the Weekly Business Hour page on Facebook, our YouTube channel. the Weekly Business Hour. Just put that in a search and it'll bring you to that page. And you also will find a history of shows there available for your listening at your pleasure. And I would encourage you, please share these shows if you don't mind. And one thing I haven't mentioned today, and I feel remiss, is if you're a local business here in the Montgomery County area, you could be a sponsor of this show. We appreciate sponsors. Lone Star Community Radio is a nonprofit station serving the community, and your sponsorship goes to the support of the radio station and the continuation of programs like the Weekly Business Hour. If you'd like to consider that, it's very economical. Just drop me a line and I'll get back to you. Send it to Rick, R-I-C-K, at irlonestar.com. And also, don't forget those emails. We get a number of emails here from people with questions about their own business, questions that, say, one of our guests spoke to something and they have a question, which I will forward those to them and they will respond. I respond to all my emails in a very timely way. And also, if you've listened to the show before, we like to share some of the questions, some of the general questions we get about business as part of the show. And I provide my answer live on the air. So please send those emails to Rick, R-I-C-K, at irlonestar.com. And I'll respond to them and look forward to receiving them. Also want to mention again, the new studios for Lone Star Community Radio will be opening in October. Look for that. It's going to be a great event. The station will be located on the first floor of the Conroe City Hall building. Be very accessible. The Conroe city government is redoing that whole first floor, and it's going to be kind of a community space. So I encourage you, keep your eye open. There will be some events. Come by the radio station. If you want to talk to us about doing your own show, you can do that as well. So consider in October the reopening of the Lone Star Community Radio Studios in downtown Conroe. Thank you again for joining us this week. And my encouragement, as it always is, lots of noise out there, lots of things going on in business, but I encourage you, focus on what's important in your business this week, and hopefully we'll see you back next Monday at 11 o'clock. Thanks.